Hello and welcome to TMI with Aldous Tyler for Friday, February 7th, 2025. Coming to you as always from beautiful Madison, Wisconsin. And, well, sometimes it's a little frustrating bringing out this program because we try to cover topics that would be meaningful for you to act on, or at least so you have the facts and hopefully are able to act on those facts. To that extent, I try to make sure that I'm working with independent journalists, ones who are on the ground covering things, really investigating things, um, which is one of the reasons why I'm very honored to have had repeatedly now Greg Palast, investigative journalist, independent journalist, who has had plenty of high-profile reports in The Guardian and Rolling Stone and other places like that. But you will remember, I hope, that we last had him on talking about Vigilantes Incorporated, which is still available online, as I understand it. If you want to see it, I still recommend you go take a look at gregpalast.com. But the fact is, in that expose that Vigilantes Inc. was, Greg talked very clearly and thoroughly about the effort to steal the vote. And that was coming up for 2024. And lo and behold, funny how it was that Harris didn't appear to win. Well, Greg wasn't just going to let that sit, of course. He knows what to do to go and dig in the numbers. And so today I'm very happy to bring back with us Greg Palast. Greg, welcome back to TMI.
Glad to be with you, Aldous.
All right. So obviously, would be nice to have a pleasant topic like, do you prefer honey or maple syrup? But that's not what we're doing today. We have to, of course, dig into what happened in November. Now, you warned us that there would be ways that would be put into motion to try to stop the vote from counting properly. Did you find evidence of that?
Yes. Well, first of all, understand, I'm going to throw some numbers at you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the top. If it weren't for Jim Crow vote suppression tactics, Donald Trump would have lost the race by 1.2 million votes. Kamala Harris would have had 3,565,000 more votes and would have won 286 electoral college votes. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia would have gone over to the Harris side.
So it would have been tight, but it would have been on her side.
Yeah, not that tight, but if she would have won, except for, but this election was a Jim Crow apartheid election. And let me go through the numbers. Now, one thing you're not going to get from me, if you're thinking I'm going to tell you about how Elon Musk messed with the vote counting machines from outer space, forget it. This is my fedora. I'm an investigative reporter. It's not a tinfoil hat. And we're going to stay away from the conspiracy nut stuff.
That's why you're always welcome here, sir.
Yeah. So we're going to go into the hard numbers. Now, why am I giving you the hard numbers? Well, one, I have a good question. Why aren't American journalists? Now, those who know me, Greg Palast, I'm a reporter. I was investigative reporter for BBC Television, the Guardian newspaper out of London. I work with Democracy Now! And Rolling Stone and others, but I am a forensic economist. That means a detective who's good with numbers. And that's my work. So numbers are what I do. And these numbers are numbers I have taken into federal court, will take into federal court. So it's not just some guy speculating about stuff. I have to prove everything I've got. And
Right.
my numbers come from the United States Elections Assistance Commission, which is an agency that very few people know about, which keeps track of voting in America, but it also keeps track of the non-votes, how many people are not allowed to vote. And that's America's dirty little secret. We don't let everyone vote. We don't count all the votes. Vote suppression is a kind of highfalutin term for shafting Black people and other voters of color out of their vote. So here's some of the numbers. In 2023, in the lead up to the election, and this is again from the U.S. government stats, 4,776,708 voters So almost 5 million voters were purged from the voter roll. What does purged mean? It means that they have literally erased these voters from the voter rolls. Now, that's not the total removed, because there are almost 20 million removed. I'm talking about the nearly 5 million who were removed without any good reason, told that they had been voters who had moved, but there was no evidence they had moved. Now, then there were a third of a million voters, 317,886 voters, to be exact, were challenged by August, had their right to have their votes counted. They were challenged not by government officials. This is something brand new, all this. Vigilante, self-proclaimed vote fraud hunters. There's all these Jim Crow laws left on the books from the 1940s and 50s, which allow individuals, the Ku Klux Klan used this plan to challenge voters. 2.12 million, to be exact, mail-in ballots were disqualified. And now I want to get into one of the issues. Whose ballot gets disqualified? I just told you over 2 million mail-in ballots were thrown in the dumpster. Now, where did I get this number? Not only from the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, but remember National Petroleum Radio, NPR? They said 13.8%, or about 1 in 7 ballots mailed in during the Democratic primaries were disqualified for all kinds of cockamamie reasons. From, for example, in Wisconsin, you forget your middle initial. You register with your middle initial, but on the outside the envelope, you don't put your middle initial, and you lose your vote gets thrown in the garbage. So 1 in 7 votes. Now, if it were random, who would care? Who would care? Which is that. But that's not what happens. According to the state of Washington, which did an analysis of mail-in votes, the chance that your ballot will be disqualified that you mail in is 400% higher if you're black than if you're white. 400% higher. Now, that's the state of Washington, which has probably the least vote suppression of any of the 50 states. Spoiled ballots. That is, you go into a voting station, and they just disqualify your ballot because you have an extra mark. You filled it, put an X instead of a bubble or something. The chance, according to the United States Civil Rights Commission, it's not Greg Palast. Again, these are government statistics. The chance your ballot will be rejected is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. 900%. So whose votes are in that dumpster? Provisional ballots. Now, these are when, you go in, and this little old lady behind the desk says, "Oh, don't worry. You've been, your name's no longer on the voter rolls. You've been purged. You've been challenged. Who knows what the heck happened? Don't worry. Just fill out this paper ballot, put it in this envelope, fill that out, and they'll check your registration, count it later." No, they won't. No, they won't. If you're not on the voter rolls, you're not on the voter rolls. Now, by federal law, they have to give you a provisional ballot, but they don't have to count it. And according, again, to the United States Elections Assistance Commission, our official agency, 44%, or nearly half of those provisional ballots, get thrown in the dumpster. If it's random, who cares? But it's not random. Of the 1.216 million provisional ballots thrown in the dumpster, nearly half thrown in the garbage there. The chance you'll be shunted to a provisional ballot, I call them placebo ballots, provisional ballots, is 300% higher if you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American than if you're white.
Which means it's a much higher chance that your provisional ballot's been tossed.
So you get 900% rejection rate. You're 9 times more likely to have your ballot rejected if you're black than you're white for technical reasons. You're far more likely to, by the way, to mail in your ballot if you're black than if you're white, because that's the preferred method of voting for African Americans, drop box balloting and mail-in balloting, for good reason. They don't trust the post office. They don't want to wait 6 hours in line. These massive long lines you have in African American districts,
right,
etc. Now, how did this happen this time? Look, we've always had Jim Crow effects on our elections. For people who know Greg Palast and have read my books like The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, or if you watch my film Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman. By the way, you can get that for free. Thank you, Leonardo DiCaprio and Jamie Foxx, who made it possible for us to offer this for free at gregpalast.com. Watch the movie Vigilantes Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitman. It's narrated by Rosario Dawson. It's produced by Martin Sheen, who introduces it. It's a movie. Bring your popcorn, learn the full story. And it is, it's entertaining. Be heartbreaking, but it's entertaining. Some of it's funny. So go there. But look, we've had, according to the Brennan Center for Justice out of NYU Law School, 30 states between 2020 and 2024, between Biden's election and now this election, 30 states passed laws making it harder to vote, particularly for voters of color. That's the Brennan Center. That's not Greg Palast. Why did they pass these laws? To win elections. Wake up. Hello. And one of the problems I have with our media, with American media. Now, again, I'm people say, oh, well, what mainstream media? I'm mainstream media. BBC, The Guardian, we're the mainstream media of the world, not the New York Times. No one reads that outside of the US. It's you put it at the bottom of a birdcage. No one takes the Times or the Washington Post seriously. So I am the mainstream, but not in America. I'm marginalized. That's why I appreciate being on your show, all of this. But let me ask a question. Here we did have the New York Times do a little article about vigilante vote challenges. We'll get more into that. We do have Washington Post talking about closing polling stations in black areas, unnecessary ID requirements, all this stuff, making it impossible. Like in Wisconsin, you can't use a student ID to vote, but you can use your gun permit to vote in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And so that right there tells you that there's a political slant going on because, I mean, come on. I'm not saying all gun owners are conservative because of course they're not. But let's face it, the majority probably are. And then the majority of students probably not necessarily conservative. So again, it's just rigging the numbers one way or the other, just putting it a little out of balance here, a little out of balance there, and it adds up so fast.
Well, it's not just a little bit always. Let me take the case of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In 2020, I did a technical report for the ACLU and Black Voters Matter Fund. You had a purge program pushed by the right-wing Bradley Foundation out of Milwaukee. These are billionaires who shut down your manufacturing in Milwaukee. All the old Allen Bradley plants are gone out of Milwaukee. That was your biggest employer.
Yeah.
Those plants were sent to China. They used the Bradley family used the billions it gained to fund these right-wing efforts at attacking the voter rolls. In particular, they fund a group in Wisconsin called Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty that I investigated, and also I even interviewed their leaders. And they were pushing a purge program called ERIC, and they wanted to remove almost 150,000 voters from the voter rolls of Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. That'll make a huge dent.
I did an analysis. Just so you know, I hired the experts who work with Amazon and the United States Post Office. Now, between Amazon and the Post Office, they know where you live.
Yeah.
And so this right-wing group said, oh, these 160,000 people don't live in Wisconsin anymore, moved out of their county. They're not legal voters. Well, we went straight through that list and name by name by name. We're not guessing. We had the Post Office and Amazon confirm for us that tens of thousands of these people targeted for removal because they supposedly never moved an inch. They simply failed to return a postcard sent by the state or this group. It looks like junk mail. So I call it the poison postcards. It's a trick you use in Wisconsin. You mail someone a postcard. Now your return rate is something under 1 out of 10 postcards because it's like my son. As a student, he looks at goes to get his mail, once a semester, but no one's going to return this card. It's not meant to be returned. It's meant to get you. And who are they targeting? Well, with the Washington Post, I actually mapped the voters of Wisconsin who were wrongly purged from the voter rolls, according to the U.S. Postal Service and Amazon. And almost every voter in Milwaukee that was purged, that was facing a purge, almost every single one was in a black majority precinct, except the only other precincts that weren't in that throw away your vote pile were several student housing precincts around the University of Wisconsin at Madison.
There it goes.
And if you see our film, Vigilantes Inc., you'll meet an American Vietnamese student who lost his vote because he just moved down the street. Well, guess what? Under Wisconsin and federal law, if you move within your county, you don't have to re-register. So what they're doing is they're playing tricks. You move your dorm room, they take away your vote. They know who that is. Now, in 2020, how did Biden, against this massive illegal purge, how did Biden win Wisconsin? Well, in 2020, we were able to convince your bipartisan elections board not to purge those voters. But in 2024, you had bigger Republican influence. I'm not being partisan about it. This is just the facts.
Right, right. Literally all facts on this.
And so now in 2024, they removed 160,000 voters in Madison, Wisconsin. And again, overwhelmingly black voters out of Milwaukee. And that's what flipped the election in Wisconsin with other games that were being played. And one of the problems is, like, for example, in Madison, by the way, Madison is not subject to the protections of the National Voter Registration Act because you have same-day voter registration. What that means is that on election day, if you find your name is not on the voter rolls, don't walk away. Don't fill out one of those ridiculous
Register.
provisional ballot.
Register.
Re-register on the spot. But normally they don't tell you, by the way, you can re-register right now and then vote. And that's what you need to do is if they find out that, but the main thing is 90 days before election, please check your registration. But Madison and the attack on the voters of Madison and Milwaukee flipped the state of Wisconsin. And that is how Trump won Wisconsin, because you didn't have a big flip in sentiment in the state. You had a big flip in who was allowed to vote. And again, they made it worse for students through the new ID laws. So basically, they know how to chip away, like you say, chip away and chip away and chip away until they just get enough to scoot by.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's all it takes. When it's a winner-take-all system per state, all you need to do is get that state, even if it's really close, you just got to get that state over that line, and bam, all electoral college votes for that state go to the person that they are rigging it for.
Yes, there's no question that if it were not for the electoral college, it would be very, very hard to steal elections in America. It's because, for example, I'm the journalist who, in the 2000, in the Gore v. Bush race, uncovered that George Bush became president of the United States by 537 votes. I mean, that was it in Florida. But that was after 58,000 black men were removed from the voter rolls. Supposedly they were felons. I uncovered that for The Guardian and BBC television. And of those 58,000 black men, not one, absolutely dead zero, were illegal voters in the state of Florida. But that's how George Bush became president. And if it weren't for our crazy electoral college system, you couldn't win by 537 votes in one state.
No.
But the solution is to stop the apartheid voting. The solution is to stop the Jim Crow voting. Ultimately, we have to get rid of the electoral college, which is an artifact, again, of slavery, of the desire to give the slave states a ultimate veto over the presidency of the United States.
That's true. So just to remind our listeners real quick, you are listening to TMI, of course. Aldous Tyler interviewing Greg Palast, who, again, is going over the numbers that happened. I had him on before the election, so we had full warning of what could happen. Unfortunately, it did. And now, Greg, I understand it took some time to compile these because these are real hard numbers. None of this is supposition.
Yeah.
And so it took a while to do. And unfortunately, that means, January 6th came and went and the votes were certified, and there was nothing to do about that because, again, you took time to get everything put together. Where do we go from here?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at my hat, I'm an investigative reporter. So I don't report until I investigate. And I have for those who don't know my background, I'm a forensic economist. I got my degree at the University of Chicago. I used to teach statistics at Indiana U. And my thing is numbers. I'm like a detective who's just good with math.
Well, Greg, that's why your reporting always counts.
Well, so what I try to do is, it's called data journalism. And I got the Global Editors Award for my data journalism on vote suppression issues in America. the Global Editors Award. So I'm respected around the world, just not in my own country. But here's the thing. The important thing is to know is that I'm working again from government numbers, hard numbers. They take a long time to get through. But it's important 4.776 million voters were literally eliminated from the voter rolls. Now, one of the most evil things that's happened this year that we need to do something about, which is why I'm here. And right now, I'm speaking to you from Chicago, where I'm going to be meeting with the Reverend Jesse Jackson to come up with a plan of counterattack against these Jim Crow tactics. Okay, as of August, the beginning of August, so 3 months before the election, we had 317,886 voters challenged. That's 1/3 voters challenged by self-proclaimed vigilantes. Now, who are these guys? It's not a government person.
Right.
This is individuals. Many, many states, in fact, a couple dozen states still have left over on their books these Jim Crow laws from the 40s and 50s, allowing individual citizens to say, don't let. So I can say under these laws, for example, in Georgia, Mississippi, Iowa, Pennsylvania, which is vital, Florida and others, I can say Aldous Tyler does not live in Madison, Wisconsin. Don't let him vote in Madison. Now, that technique of challenge of a non-governmental person saying, don't let that person vote, that was used initially by the Ku Klux Klan in 1946 to knock off most of the black voters of Georgia, challenging their rights to vote and electing their one of their Klansmen, Eugene Talmadge, as governor of Georgia. Now in 46, Harry Truman had the FBI go in. They're about to indict the governor of Georgia. But just before they were going to arrest him, he drank himself to death. But what's interesting is that this vigilante voter attack was considered against the law, felony federal crime in 46. Well, why wasn't it this past year, Mr. Biden? I know that he had a government that was cognitively impaired, but he didn't take on the issue of these challenges, this Klan style attack, which was organized by Trump forces, particularly a group called True the Vote out of Texas, which is a Trump front. They're the people that came up with that crazy film. Well, maybe crazy, but unfortunately, very influential film, 2000 Mules.
Yep.
In which they accused 2,000 black men, they call them mules, of stuffing ballot drop boxes around the country. And it was completely bogus. The distributor, Sinclair, has been sued to a fare thee well because the guys the black men they showed on camera supposedly stuffing ballot drop boxes were all legal voters. So they're getting sued into oblivion. But this group, True the Vote, was still very effective. They had challenged, they signed up 40,000 vigilante volunteers. 40,000. This got virtually no coverage in the U.S. press. They challenged 250,000 people by August with a plan, as Martin Sheen says at the beginning of my film, with a plan to reach 2 million voters, to challenge 2 million voters. We don't know how many in the end because the states are stonewalling us, but I can tell you it was enough to flip Georgia. Absolutely no question. In Georgia alone, according to the NAACP, which I work with, if you go to gregpalast.com, you can see my work and reports. There's no charge for subscribing. And again, you can see the film Vigilantes Inc., no charge.
Well, I mean, basically, being an investigative journalist, you let people investigate you if they need to.
Yeah, if you want to investigate me, go right ahead.
It's all there.
But, all I could tell you is it's my numbers that these characters don't like. And so you have these individual challenges. They expected 200,000 in Georgia by election day, just in Georgia. And this had a massive effect in Arizona, a massive effect in Nevada, a massive effect in Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump's lawyer, Cleta Mitchell, formed her own vigilante challenge group called Eagle AI or Eagle Eye. Now, it's very interesting because back in 1964, the Republicans had a group called Eagle Eye.
The KKK thing, right?
Yeah, well, they challenged Hispanic voters in states like Arizona. So they brought back this racist program, literally, but now they call it Eagle AI. They still pronounce it Eagle Eye because they use artificial intelligence to artificially challenge voters of color. It's overwhelmingly voters of color. In fact, if you go to my website, or if you watch the film, you'll see one of the voters, because I'm talking about numbers, like 1/3 challenged by August, hundreds of thousands more. You got to meet the people, like Major Gamaliel Turner, career military officer, African American. You'll meet him in my film Vigilantes Inc. 2 days before the election, he calls up his voting office. He's in He's been assigned as a soldier from the Fort Benning area where he lives to California. And he said, "Where's my absentee ballot?" They said, "Well, Mr. Turner, you've been challenged." He said, What does that mean? Well, no problem. You can get your ballot. Just kind of come in and prove you're an American citizen. You live where you live. This is a career military officer. He says, 2 days before the election, you want me to come 2,600 miles? That's all I have to do to get my vote. And by the way,
military residences can be anywhere, for crying out loud.
right. Well, believe it or not, American soldiers are allowed to vote absentee, even if they're black soldiers.
Supposedly, yes.
Alton Russell challenged 4,000 voters, overwhelmingly black soldiers out of the Fort Benning area. This is the
chairman of
Party.
the GOP. There?
Right. He's not a government official. He just
Right.
got a list of 4,000 names from this Texas group, True the Vote, and literally submitted an email, just emailed a spreadsheet and said, just stop all these people from voting. And they did. Now, just so you know, Major Turner ultimately did fly 5,000 miles round trip to get his vote saved in federal court. But the other 4,000, including all those black soldiers, did not get their votes. That's what was happening in Georgia. We had one woman in Georgia, you'll see in my film, who personally, are you ready for this, challenged 32,000 voters, because what they've done is taken Jim Crow, put it in cyberspace. They take these gigantic lists of targeted people. Now, these people don't know who they're talking about. In fact, you'll see in my film, this guy, Alton Russell, who challenged Major Turner, he likes to dress up like a vigilante. I'm not kidding, with the 6-gun and the cowboy hat. He pretends he's Doc. He literally likes to play Doc Holliday and the vigilante. He shows up with his 6-gun and cowboy hat at this house where I'm filming him. And I said, would you like to meet your host? Sure. Major Turner comes out. He's in Major Turner's house, this African-American officer whose vote he challenged. I said, "Do you know this house you're in?" "No." Here's your host. "By the way, you met Major Turner before?" "No." "Been in this house before?" "No." "Well, you said that Major Turner does not live here and you took away his vote. You challenged his right to vote." And by the way, I did ask him at Major Turner's request, "Would you like to just apologize to the Major?" That's all he requested, was an apology. And the guy just absolutely refused to apologize. He says, "Well, obviously I don't know the system." "Well, yeah, but you challenged 4,000 people." I asked the woman who challenged 32,000 people. I showed her pictures of some of her black neighbors that she challenged. I said, "Do you know these people?" "No." I said, "You challenge their right to vote?" And she says, "Well, I can't call 32,000 people, but you could challenge 32,000 people's right to vote." So again, we have this Jim Crow operation. We have beat these things before. Remember, in 2020, Biden did take the state of Georgia by famously 11,000 and some votes. That's only because the grassroots groups got so many of the people that were on the purge lists. We went to federal court when I did the name-by-name analysis of people wrongly purged, overwhelmingly black voters in Georgia. 198,000 of those voters were purged from the voter rolls wrongly, illegally. We actually had their names and addresses. If it weren't for the action of Black Voters Matter Fund, Rainbow Push, NAACP, you would not have had, Biden could not have won that election. By the way, notice not the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party didn't do a damn thing, but I don't count on parties to save by vote. So these nonpartisan voting rights groups saved Biden's bacon in 2020. They're also responsible, by getting all these voters back on the voter rolls, they're responsible for Senators Warnock and Ossoff, two great progressive Democrats who were elected to the Senate. And again, Warnock in 2022, again, by fighting the Jim Crow effect. I interviewed both Warnock and Ossoff on this. More important, I tried to interview the governor of Georgia. You'll see in the film, I confront him. I had to hunt him down. I found him at a pig roast.
Oh, yeah, Brian Kemp,
to see why are you knocking off black people? Is this the only way you can win? He didn't like that. In fact, he actually, believe it or not, we don't see it in the film. You'll see my confrontation. What you don't see in the film is that he had me arrested, but it was a catch and release because he claimed falsely to the state police that the owner of the pig roast restaurant said that I was trespassing. But then the owner said, no, he didn't. Finally, someone's asked this governor a real question. So they had to let me go. But so all I'm telling you is that it is a concerted effort. And I'm not being partisan by saying it. All the challengers, all these vigilante KKK vote suppressors have been white Republican operatives. I'm not being partisan about it. I'm nonpartisan. I'm just reporting the facts, ma'am.
Well, I mean, in a different era, they would have been white Democratic
Yes.
people because of the fact that that's where the allegiances were at the time. But so it's not
Mhm.
partisan. We're just literally factual on this. Greg, allow me to editorialize just one moment.
Sure.
This is not on you. This is just me. I have to say it. If you can, in your heart, challenge the right of thousands of votes of people you don't know, you can't see them as people. You cannot in your heart see them as real people. Not as real as you are, because you sure wouldn't want your vote done that way. It just
Yes.
blows my mind. It blows my mind.
And I want to say, by the way, one question I constantly get asked is, well, why don't the Democrats or other groups challenge Republican voters to even it up? And the answer is talking to black voters matter fun, talking to NAACP, et cetera, in the leadership. They say, if you've ever had your vote taken from you, it is such a stab in the heart. We would never do it to anyone else. We don't want to do tit for tat. We want to do a wrong doesn't make a right. We want to make sure that that we end this racist Jim Crow crap. It's really damaging. And when I talked, for example, I talked about 198,000 voters in Georgia who were wrongly removed from the voter rolls. And I talked about the tens of thousands wrongly removed in Wisconsin. You get to meet like this young student in Madison, Wisconsin. It's just not fair. Why should that kid lose his vote because he just moved down the street? He's a student voter in Madison. They know what they're doing. They're targeting young people. That is their voters of color too. Their color is blue. In Georgia, when I talked about 198,000 voters were wrongly removed, which swamped Trump's supposed victory. That included, I was the polling station in Atlanta when one black person after another was being thrown on the station, including a 92-year-old woman in a walker who'd been voting at the same voting station for 50 years. Her granddaughter took her there, drove her there, was in hysterics. They told her she couldn't vote there because she doesn't live in Atlanta anymore. Well, I went down the street to her house there in Atlanta where they said she didn't vote.
And there it is.
And there was a picture of Martin Luther King having dinner there with her on the wall 50 years earlier.
Uh-oh.
And I said, you knew King? She says, well, King was my cousin. He came here every Sunday after church. And so they knocked off Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin after 50 years at the same polling station. You have to understand how emotional and frightening this is to voters of color. Now, you know, I mean, look, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, one of the questions you always have to ask is, because the vote suppression factor, I talked about 3,565,000 votes that would have gone to Harris. One thing to realize in my numbers about millions being purged and removed, some would not have voted for Harris. Some would not have voted for all. I take all of that out. The ultimate suppression factor is 2.3% minimum. Now in Wisconsin, that absolutely, unquestionably made the difference. Right. And so same with Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Mm-hmm. So they can't, but it also means they can't steal all the votes all the time. So you check your registration, protect yourself, fight against these Jim Crow tactics, because they can't steal every vote every time. It's real simple. We can do something about this. And in Wisconsin, the immediate thing you can do if you're purged is just re-register on the spot. Make sure you bring all kinds of photo ID and proof, like an electric bill or gas bill or a lease or something that proves that shows your address, and re-register on the spot. don't
Right.
take that provisional ballot. So in Madison, you have an extra option you don't have in other states. The problem is, because you do have same-day registration, the Justice Department does not have jurisdiction over Wisconsin because the National Voter Registration Act does not apply to states which have same-day registration. So you don't have the normal federal protections. You got to protect your vote in Madison, and
We
you've
got to
got to
do it ourselves. Yep.
and also we got to protect their vote because you are a swing state,
Yes.
and in terms of you've got to make this an issue, if not the issue, because if you don't have the right to vote, you ain't going to get clean. You forget about any other issues.
Oh, yeah.
You will have no say if you have no vote. No, if
Nope.
you're not a voter or if you've been removed from the voter roll, you're not only your opinion, you're not only doesn't your vote count, your opinion, your welfare, your life doesn't count.
Well, Greg, thank you. I appreciate you coming on to go over that, and I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to actually come on over back to the Midwest into Chicago to meet with Reverend Jesse Jackson, see what actions we can take on this. But again, thank you for coming by and making sure we had the numbers after you took all the effort to get them for us.
Okay, and by the way, go to gregpalast.com where I have an article called Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won. Here are the numbers. It's at the top of gregpalast.com, GregPalast. Go to gregpalast.com. Look at the numbers yourself. You don't have to trust me. Just take a look at those numbers. It's not about me. It's about the hard numbers. Thank you, Aldous, for giving me this wonderful platform to tell the truth on them. Thanks.
Greg, you are always welcome to come out here because you spit facts, sir, and that's what we're looking for.
Okay, just the facts, man. Thanks. Bye.
Absolutely. You've been listening to TMI with Aldous Tyler. We'll be right back.